Thank you everyone for joining us for the 17th episode of the CEO Journey podcast, where we talk about all things entrepreneurship, business and advice. Today, it is an absolute honour to be joined by the one and only Piers Linney. He needs no introduction. He was a former Dragon on Dragon's Den, and he is now back in the trenches with his new venture, Moblox. So Piers, how are you doing?
Back in the trenches, you can say that again. Well, several businesses actually, but I've sort of started 3 businesses in the last 2 years. Which is great fun, but it's you always learn, don't you?
100%. Yeah. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on, by the way, and it's quite a surreal experience for me because I've been watching Dragon's Den for the longest, and your season was definitely my favourite one. But
quite a long time ago now, wasn't it? It's probably getting on a bit. Mind you, they rerun it during COVID, so people used to sort of stop me thinking, I know you from somewhere. And after COVID, they rerun lots of the series. I was being stopped in the streets again.
Yeah, you can see all the clips, but yeah, definitely you played a very key part in that. So I guess to get straight into it, I'd really like to understand a bit more about your upbringing. So who was young Piers Linney, and is there anything in your earliest context that really shaped the entrepreneur you are today?
So my mom's from Barbados, kind of Windrush generation. My dad was a Mancunian lad, very bright. He actually got to Cambridge. And I was born in Stoke-on-Trent, lived there till I was about 9. Moved up north. My dad got a job near Manchester, just outside Manchester. And we moved to a small mill town up in the hills in deepest, darkest Lancashire, where the Industrial Revolution started. And one of my favourite subjects at school, unlike most young people, was history. And I don't know what it was. They just found it fascinating. And when I was in my classes, I went to a comprehensive school, failed my 11 plus, and they'd say, in the weavers' cottages, they had big windows so they could had enough light. Then they had the mills, and the mills were built this way to maximise their efficiency. And they could look out the window, and there's weavers' cottages and mills. And the sort of the entrepreneurs of the age fascinated me. You know, the UK entrepreneurs, Jason Bardon, Kingdom, Brunels, your Bolton and Watts, whoever it might be, and also the US, the Vanderbilts, Carnegies, fascinated me. But when I grew up, when I said I wanted to go into business, nobody really knew what I was talking about, and lots of people who around me were in business. But they had, Eddie had a quarry, and Graham had a quarry. Eddie was a builder. Derek was a joiner. It was those kind of trades. And when I said I was quite interested in business, people said to me, "Oh, well, you probably need to become an accountant." So I grew up in the north of England. I managed to get into Manchester University by hook or by crook, and then I ended up becoming a lawyer in the city. So I went from my Milltown high school to becoming a lawyer in the city of London and an investment banker. So my background, actually, people don't really know this, is professional. So I'm a city lawyer, and I was a banker at Credit Suisse, which is one of the largest investment banks in the world. So I was in my stripy suits and braces for a couple of years, only about 3. And I left during the first dot-com wave, and I haven't worked for anybody since.
And I guess to trace it back, Piers, did you have any sort of before going to university? Did you have any like entrepreneurial ventures? Did you have any side hustles? What were you thinking at that age?
Yeah, they call them side hustles now. I tend to call them businesses. No matter how big it is. But yeah, so I started young. So my first business, and this is not some reverse engineered founder story. This was the real deal. I had a paper round business. So when I was 13, it was, and I had a paper round initially. So I was working for 6 days a week, getting up at 6 a.m, and if I was late, I got docked 50p. I got probably at about £5 a week, showing how old I am now. And in Lancashire in those days, when it snowed, you couldn't see a car. I mean, definitely been global warming in Lancashire, if nowhere else in the world. And I thought, this was just hard work. And then on Sundays, the newsagent didn't deliver. So you had to go down to the town centre. We were about half a mile away. It was a drive, not a walk. And, in the weather and the rain up in the hills there, it could be a bit of a pain. And my dad one morning said, can't bother, can you go and get them for me? And I said, yeah, of course I can. So off went my BMX, picked up the paper, came back, gave it to him. He gave me the money for it, obviously. And he gave me kind of like a tip, essentially. And then it cut a very long story short after that. I started doing it for neighbours. And I kind of built this sort of paper round on a Sunday morning. But obviously, I couldn't buy the papers from this is where you start to learn about business. I couldn't buy the papers from the newsagent because there'd be no margin, because the price was printed on the front, I think, if I remember correctly. And so I thought, where do they get the papers from? So I bought the newspapers from the wholesaler. You see these American films where they dump a huge bundle of papers and throw them on the street in the New York street. It's like that, but on my mum's doorstep in Lancashire. So I bought the papers wholesale. I wrote all the names, addresses on it, put them in a big bag, and I delivered it on my bike. And it was quite hard work. It took me about, I don't know, 2-3 hours on a Sunday morning, but I was earning 20 quid. Right. So you can see that the lesson I learned there was you find a problem, you solve it, and you do it in a way in which you can make a margin, make some money, and you put a lot of effort and hard work into it, and you can make some money. And that was the first business I sold. I think I sold it. I think it was the number I always remember is 200 quid, which is a lot of money.
Wow. How did that come about?
Well, you get to the age soon after, a few years later, where it's not cool to have a paper round. Right. So I put an advert in the local paper and sold it. It was my first exit. And the problem is you earn good money during every week, but also at Christmas, you probably earn about 200-300 quid in tips. So that was all kind of built into my valuation. But then after that, I did Betterware, which you won't have a clue about now. Betterware was like door-to-door pots and pans and stuff to help people open, lids on jam jars because they're a bit stiff. Potato peelers, whatever it was. You've got Amazon there. But pre that, you deliver a brochure, and then they'd go down and pick up the order, and then again, a couple of weeks later, it would all turn up, and I drive around there, my dad's car now, and deliver it. So I was earning quite good money, and I did that through late school, my A-levels especially. And then I was selling that kind of copy perfume when I was at doing my A-levels, made a few £1,000s out of that, paid for a trip to Barbados. Wow. And then at university, usual story, doing parties. University, I worked in bars, and I ended up running sort of bars in sort of private clubs. Mm-hmm. And then, where are we now? And then law school, I was doing company formations. And then after that, I ended up working as a full-time job as a lawyer. But even then, a friend of mine was into films, and we did film finance. We did film finance using the enterprise investment scheme. So if you invested in the film, you got your investment, obviously, shares. Also, you got a part in it as an extra, usually a dead body in a film in a war, after some battle. And my friend went on to run Lionsgate in Europe. If you watch films, you'll know that name. Yep. And he became a big wig and still is a big wig in the film industry. And I went on. So to answer your question, I've always been, if you want to call it that, hustling and having side hustles alongside studying and even working, even when I was a professional in the city.
Yeah. And you obviously went to university, as you said. What did you study there?
So I did. Everyone said to me, "You want to be in business? Do accounting." And I was like, "What the hell?" And I did a maths A level, hated it, dropped it. Did law at nights, believe it or not. And because it was a bit like history and jurisprudence, I love that. And I ended up doing a law and accounting degree, actually an accounting and law degree at Manchester University. Right. And it was a 4-year degree, thank God, which meant that all my friends left after 3 years. But the last year I actually did some work. And I got a 2-1. And then I got a placement I got a job with a Manchester law firm. They asked me to get jobs. I mean, I applied to 68 law firms before I got a job in the City of London. My job was in Manchester. But when I got to London to law school, I wanted to be in London. So I kind of started applying again. And because of my, I didn't go to, Oxbridge. I did my A-levels twice, I got a decent degree though, and I got a prize in law and economics. So I kind of pulled my socks up by that point. And I managed to get a job in the city as a lawyer. 1 year into that, I thought I don't want to be a lawyer long term. But as I was at a venture capital law firm, right. So I was seeing, Daniel Levy buying Tottenham Hotspur. I literally sat in the room. Wow. That's how long ago it was. And I'd be thinking, well, I want to be one of those guys, the investor or the entrepreneur, really. And someone said to me, you should go into investment banking and understand a bit more about business and numbers. My response was, what's investment banking? Because I don't have a clue. So I ended up in investment banking, and then as the dot-com 1.0 came along, I left.
Right. And obviously you've touched on that experience, and it's great to learn a bit about it. But what was your general experience working in sort of the investment banking, corporate law?
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I mean, law, I always understood in law. I do a lot of law today, really, but it wasn't for me long term. I couldn't see myself being a lawyer. Investment banking was really long hours. You didn't see daylight for 3 years, really. But I loved it. I knew this was almost like my Willy Wonka ticket. And I kind of ran with it. I thought about, how I got from my comprehensive or high school, whatever it was, in Lancashire to, Credit Suisse working in Canary Wharf. And this is before there was a Jubilee, if you know London, before the Jubilee line there, or the shopping centre, all the big towers. There's about 4 shops there. Usually the shop sold you shirts to bankers because you did so many all-nighters in the morning, you had to go and buy new shirts and underwear normally. Right. So I loved it. It's a Willy Wonka ticket. But when the internet came along, I saw that as the gold rush. I thought I've got to hitch up a wagon to a horse and head west. So that's what I did essentially.
Yeah. And would you recommend if an individual obviously knows they want to end up running their own thing, would you recommend them taking that corporate path before obviously starting a business, or what would you say to them?
It's a difficult question now because you can be it's hard to be generic, but my generic, if you want to be like that, view is it's good to get some experience. And the beauty of working for a large corporate or any company really is you learn from it. So you learn about people, managing people, processes, systems, how the nuts and bolts of running a business. Everyone thinks that running a business is, getting onto the internet and shouting about it and, making social media content and sales funnels. It's not. It's about the detail. It's about process, systems, HR, hiring people, firing people, managing people, raising finance. That's what running a business is about, especially when it comes to scaling a business. So my view is if you can, stay in school, or if not, learn wherever you can. You don't have to go to university these days, and then get some experience, and then take that experience. And then my view is everyone should start a business at least once, and take that experience and know-how, and it'll stand you in good stead. It'll reduce your execution risk because very few people stroll out of school at 16 or even 18, start a business, and are super successful.
Yeah, completely agree. So, obviously after that corporate path, and was the .com time where you had that eureka moment when you're like, look, I want to start my own thing now?
Yeah, I wouldn't quite call it a eureka moment. It was more, basically, so when I left Credit Suisse, you get your bonus. Yeah. Most people in the first .com wave, if you actually look back, they were wealthy, they were bankers, or they were management consultants. So they were young people who could afford often to take a couple of years out. And then they could go back if it didn't work out. And I got my bonus and I kind of resigned. And they literally, just like in the films again, they literally give you a cardboard box. You put your plant in it, and off you go. And as I left the building, I raised $700,000. Wow. Probably closed about 400 of it. But just to give you an idea of what it was like then. But I learned very quickly that we were bright. We could write business plans. I could do the legal structure. Write financial models. We had a good idea. But the execution and actually running a business was quite different. And you learn very, very quickly that, planning, execution, and selling are quite different. And the reality bit very quickly. So you have to learn very, very quickly. So I enjoyed it, but it was a time where we launched in just before the .com crash. We had to refinance. We had to do a convertible, structure the team. My partner's family then funded actually, and I left. So you saw a whole economic cycle, which usually take you about 5, 7, 8 years, in about 12 months. Wow. So we learned a lot during that time. And you got to fly to America, big US .coms approaching you, think about acquiring you. I mean, it was crazy times.
And are we talking about Genesis Communications here?
No, this was it was a community of doctors, basically, and practitioners, where we did research for pharma companies, basically. We were kind of sitting in the middle of them. And again, great business model, but probably 10 years too early.
Right, okay. And then what was the end result of that business? Did you end up getting acquired?
Yeah, well, no, I left, but my friends on this funded it, and then kind of sold the database years later, didn't make any money out of it.
Okay.
I mean, it was just an astounding result that my business partner actually kept it going because most .com didn't make it.
Okay, yeah. Okay, and so what was that first year in the business like? Because obviously that first year is deemed to be the most challenging part where you're...
well, I've been doing stuff on the side, hadn't I? So I had some experience, but it was enlightening. Okay. I mean, the hardest thing to them was managing people, actually. It's hiring people, managing people. The business side of it, we were sort of reasonably good at naturally, or we had some experience. But it was just that reality of managing people where, when I left, so after that, I went into dance music, I did various other things. Then I ended up back in finance, but doing my own thing. And when I was in the sort of media sector, I couldn't understand why, people went home at 5:30 or 6. If I had something to do for the next morning, I would be there till 3 a.m, until it got done, because that was the work ethic, and that's how people operated where I came from. And it took me about 18 months, literally, to calm down and realize that people have got lives, they've got partners, they've got pets that need walking, they've got children, they've got hobbies, and they've got a life. Yeah. So it was quite interesting. And I've never, in some ways, that work ethic there's a downside to it, but there's an upside to it. It's that, somebody who's on your team is just going to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And I miss that. I've never quite come across that since.
Could you elaborate on the downsides of having that really strong work ethic? Well,
it's people get burnt out, so people can't cope with it. You have the analysts in the city literally, I would do an all-nighter realistically every 2 weeks. My longest stint, I'm not making this up, was arriving at work. We were doing a white knight defense. So when you get a hostile takeover, the client, the listed company, doesn't want to be taken over by that particular company, will go and ask you to find a white knight. Someone's coming riding over the hill on a white horse, and be the white knight and save them. And basically, you have to work to a timetable. So stuff needs to get done by these dates, or else. And I arrived at my desk Wednesday, probably 8:30 a.m. by the time I got to it, and I left it at 6 p.m. on Friday, and that's without washing or changing my clothes. And I remember getting home, lying on my garden flat bed in West London, and I think I slept for like 16 hours, something ridiculous. Wow. So that's not good in the long run. You can do it for a short period of time, and I think the world has changed now. They've calmed down a little bit, but that was the downside of it. But I didn't care, man. I was there, and I thought this is my opportunity to shine. And you got paid an absolute fortune. I was earning more money in a bonus than my parents earned put together.
Wow. So how did Dragon's Den come about then, Piers?
So Dragon's Den. So I after the sort of internet, I was in internet and I was in music and media, and then I thought, and after that, I was literally sat home one day, with I did have a Rolodex in those days, literally my contacts and a phone. I thought, wow, what the hell am I going to do now? And I ended up specializing in hedge fund financing for UK, US, and some German special opportunities. So bringing money basically from US hedge funds to put into deals. And one day I realized that I kind of know what deals the hedge funds want. Why find them? Why not to create them? And that was the epiphany where I started making a bit of money. And then I went through that. I ended up a partner in a hedge fund for a couple of years. And then I ended up buying business. So I was always buying businesses, investing in businesses, helping people start businesses, and just supporting them along the way. And some of the businesses that I invested in or acquired or got involved in became quite big over time. Or some were already quite big and we acquired them. And I was sort of found myself now, I'd been this mixed race, comprehensive school kid that had found himself working in the city as a lawyer, as a banker. He owned a number of companies, some turning over probably 45 million quid, something like that, and making money, sold some of them, made some money, had a profile. And I ended up on the list of most influential Black Britons, the 100 most influential Black Britons. I think my dad at the time joked that I was in at 99. So, and then people started saying to me, and I became a role model for the government, for young Black men and boys at the time. I'd never thought about it. People said to me, you should be a role model. I said, what are you talking about? I was looking around me, why? And then when I realized, when I did look around me, that there weren't many people who looked like me around me in everything I'd done, quite literally. So I think if you research me, I'm a big sort of champion of diversity and inclusion. I sit on Sky's Diversity Advisory Council as well. And through that, I got noticed. So the first program I actually did was The Secret Millionaire. Right. I don't know if you remember that. I don't know how old you are, but this is 2011. So this is where you go into a community. Mine was Wolverhampton, pretending you're someone. I think I was telling you some like IT consultant, looking at how inmates or could learn IT systems or whatever when they leave prison. And anyways, there's a cover story. And I was in this young offenders institution in Wolverhampton. And that program then obviously rose my profile, was kind of one-off. And then I was approached to be on Dragon's Den. So the first year it didn't happen. The second year I was approached again. And I wasn't really sure about doing it, about being a celebrity. I was busy. I didn't have businesses where they were on the high street, where you could go. They were B2B, my businesses typically, so it didn't really help me sell stuff. But these things come along, and I've met many people that say to me, I was approached to Dragon's Den, and I said no. And I was, well, why would you? So I eventually, there's a story to this. So I was I donated to Richard Branson's charity, Virgin Unite, and I was in the Ulusaba private game reserve in Kruger National Park in South Africa, and he's got this beautiful 6-star kind of hotel there called Ulusaba. Basically, it's like a James Bond lair, and I was there with Richard Branson, flown in with him and his family for about a couple of days there, just doing a bit of hanging out, talking about business, sharing ideas, things like that, and also going on safari. So I thought, who do I talk to about business and media and how you bring the two together and the pros and the cons? Who's got experience of that? Obviously, Sir Richard. So again, it's not some reverse engineer story. So literally, we ended up having a Corona sitting on this table overlooking these lions, like chasing around these impalas, whatever the hell they were. Anyway, and I told them about Dragon's Den, they were approaching me, and the producer, and I still know her to this day, was ringing me, saying, "How are you doing? We need to know." And Richard, so Richard said to me, he gave me some advice. He said, "Look, TV is very powerful." He even said to me that back in the day, he'd get on a plane for a decent news spot. So, social media is great, but, traditional media is still very, very powerful. And he said, screw it, just do it, as you'd expect, because he'd just launched that book about that time, I think, or one of them. And I walked off, said, "Thank you very much. Appreciate your input." Okay. And I started walking off. And he got me to ring the producers. And I remember saying to the producer Dragon's Den, "I'm sat here in South Africa with Sir Richard Branson, and he told me to tell you that I'm in." And that's how I ended up on Dragon's Den.
Wow. And were you running your businesses whilst on the show, essentially? Did you?
Oh, yeah, that was one of the tricky things about it. So, So a lot of people on Dragon's Den, Stephen's on there now, who's doing a great job because he's kind of mixing it up a bit. So he's sort of younger, he's exited a couple of businesses, but the kind of Dragon really was someone that's kind of been there, done it, got the t-shirt.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really. I was sort of a bit like Stephen, actually, sort of still in the game. Yeah. So it could be quite time consuming in a way. And I was the first sort of anyone with kind of black heritage on the show as well. So I was quite different. I think I was the first person who didn't actually wear a suit either. I kind of mixed up a bit. I was the first to do tech deals. So I did the first proper tech deal, which was Lost My Name, which became Wonderly, the children's personalized books. I think I got 5% for 100 grand, which was the highest ever valuation of Dragon's Den until a couple of years ago. Until some crypto thing came along, I think. And I remember everyone taking them, having a go at me, saying, "You can't do deals like that. 5%, what are you doing?" That's what the program's about. Anyway, the guys sold that business for multiple tens of millions about 2 years ago. So I did well out of Dragon's Den. And more importantly, so did those founders. Yeah.
Well, that's incredible. So what is the reality of the show? Because obviously we see what's on TV, but we don't know what happens behind the scenes.
So it is real. So obviously it's quite interesting. So it's funny looking back at it now. You asked me about it. It's like you're talking about somebody else. It's weird. So they said to me, "Do you want to do Dragon's Den?" I goes, "Yeah." So I get back to UK. You do a quick sort of like test in the studio to make sure you're comfortable with it, and that's the end of that. Next thing, you're turning up in Manchester, the studio, and you got some makeup on. I put my Alexander McQueen shirt on and shoes and all this. Yeah. And then you're sat down next to between, I think, Peter and Deborah, and they're like, "Hello, good morning." And Kelly, who I'm still friendly with to this day, it was her first. Kelly and I did it for 2 years together. And they go, "Off you go." And that's it. So there's like 7 cameras, some hidden, some in your face. And the first entrepreneur comes out and they pitch. So if you think about it, if someone is pitching for 5 minutes or so, whatever it is, you've got 5 people, you're going to ask questions, maybe 10 minutes each. So you're already up to an hour, aren't you? Quite easily. Yeah. If it's interesting, it'd be an hour and a half, eventually. It's not interesting, you might be gone within 45 minutes. And what was always made me laugh is that the producers always said, "Oh, well," so don't say anything about them. That's how it works. Never stop rolling the cameras. But often they say, "Oh, this one we think it's interesting. It could be like a business lessons, i.e., it's not really investable." And they go, "And this one, we quite good. This one's quite investable." And it always turned out to be the other way around because the producers didn't have a clue what made a business he'd want to invest in.
Yeah.
So the reality, and then what they have to do. This is why Dragon's Den's persisted. It's quite hard to do business on TV because essentially most of it's boring. But that moment of the pitch, that jeopardy, that concern, that risk you're taking by, putting your cards on the table and your ambition or your dreams, and someone saying, kicking you in the sort of shins about it and saying yes or no to your face. That moment is very televisual. But it's a fleeting moment often in real business. Building a business is a very different thing, but it's hard to capture on TV just due to the length of time it takes. Yeah. That's why Dragon's Den persist. But then what they have to do, to answer your question, is find something that people want to watch. Mm-hmm. So you might see on Dragon's Den, Piers Linney hasn't invested because he's not convinced in the branding or the technology or whatever it might be. There's some reason that was mentioned, that was mentioned in the conversation.
Yeah.
The reason I didn't invest is because it was a franchise with a very loose agreement that was a subsidiary of some Canadian holding company.
And they don't show that on TV.
Well, it didn't make any sense structurally, legally, to go anywhere near it. But you can't use it on TV because you just switch off and go and watch Gogglebox. So, so they have to find something, a story especially when someone's crying. They love that one. So Dragon's Den's real, but it is edited, and they find it, and they've got that kind of journalistic. If you're a journalist, you can't sort of change the story too much or move away from it. So they have to do that, but they're trying to find a theme or thread within it that's particularly interesting in each story.
Yeah, and I guess you talked about the tech deal that you made and how successful that was. Was that your most successful investment on the show?
Yeah, but that's probably the most successful investment on Dragon's Den ever.
Yeah, on Dragon's Den.
So you've got people that have invested in things they're probably still in. They're probably making good money out of it, actually. But in terms of an investment where someone has walked in, you invested money, and I'm talking about tech now, really. You invested in a tech company, and 7-8 years later, whenever it was, there was an exit. A proper exit, and Google invested another event, put about £12 million into this business. Then a proper shareholders behind it, and a proper in and out exit. Probably the only one I'm aware of. I'm sure there are others, but the only one I'm aware of though. And the number they exited for was significant. So, but that's rare. So Dragon's Den, if you're a venture capital investor, you have a portfolio. So my portfolio, I think it was like 9 deals. 9 handshakes, 6 done, 1 failed, 4 and got my money back essentially, and 1 was a flyer. And that's what venture capital's like. You always get 1 that returns the fund, and I had that one.
Yeah, and what was your most failed investment on the show? Is there an investment that you regret the most?
Just don't regret any of them. You don't regret backing people. You make decisions, don't you? But just one where you just struggled to get it to market, and lots of other issues, and you lost your money. But I'm still in touch with those founders today.
Exactly. And how actively do you get involved in the deal once you've, invested? Are you an active investor, or do you just let the founders run it?
Depends on the founder and the business and the dragon, actually. Some dragons have teams, but I was always, it was me, it was hands-on. So obviously, Dragon's Den, you shake your hand, you do a deal, right? You don't just hand over a suitcase full of cash out back. Then you do due diligence, there's lawyers, accountants, there's a contract, it's like an angel investment, exactly the same thing. But obviously the BBC loses interest as soon as the cameras stop rolling because they've got what they need in the can to make a program. But you have to go on and make the investment and do a deal. I think that a lot of founders, people on the show have become a bit cuter now about the fact that the publicity and the PR value. So I think more deals now as a percentage don't close, which is a shame. But and they don't regret any of them, really.
Yeah. And what was it like when you came out of the show? How did you cope with that media?
I was a reluctant celebrity. I didn't really want to be or enjoy being a celebrity, to be quite frank. I didn't go to opening, the people go to opening of a fridge once a bit on TV, opening a flipping envelope. It wasn't really me. And I sort of did what I did, really. And I was always being sort of B2B.
Yeah.
I mean, what annoyed me were people, thing about being a minor celebrity is that people think they know you. They think that's you, and it's not you. It's a caricature of you the BBC has created. Having said that, having had that profile, or have that profile, I suppose, they built it in different ways, has meant that I've gone on to do things that I probably would never been able to do. I've in terms of business, but not so much business, but just personal experiences, people I've met, places I've been, it can close doors. I think my ex-chairman, a chap called Sir Ken Alissa, he's a guy, he's the Lord Lieutenant of Greater London. If you see he's a mixed race chap with a sword who's always with the royal family whenever they're in London. Wow. And he said to me, I always remember him saying to me, you can go two directions, Piers. One is serious and one is celebrity. Go to the opening of a fridge or stay serious. And I went down the serious route. So I ended up being a trustee of the UK's largest innovation foundation, £500 million foundation for 6 years. I was on the board of the government bank, British Business Bank, on the board of that during COVID. So that's, we put 90 billion with a B into the financial support into the market. I am a advisor to, I can't mention the name yet because it's not public, but a very large auto manufacturer on their future strategy. And also I'm an advisor to Sky on their diversity and inclusion. I do some other things as well. So I get to do these things that fascinate me and that you learn from, and you meet really interesting people that, that challenge you. And that's what life's about.
Yeah, no, 100%. And thank you for sharing your experience about Dragon's Den. And I guess I'd like to understand a bit more about your investing framework. So what qualities do you look for in an entrepreneur if you're looking to invest in their company or not?
So let's go back to Dragon's Den, right? So what you're really investing in a very early stage company is the individual. So yes, the plan, the market, the opportunity, and all that good stuff's got to hold water. But it's really about, is this person capable? Can I work with them? Yeah. You're going to have to. And are they capable of executing this plan? And if not this plan, then they have to pivot, because often that's the case, or it evolves, which often is always the case. Are they going to be able to deal with it? And the stress of the strain, they're building a business. That's what you're really looking at. And at the end of the other extreme, like a continuum, if you're acquiring, say, I don't know, a utility company, right? You can lose the whole board and management team in some plane crash, and placement next day doesn't matter to some extent. The world will carry on. The big risk there is more probably regulatory risk. So it's very different. So, and as you move from one side of that spectrum continuum to the other, it changes. So as businesses get larger, yes, you are looking at the team and ability to execute, but also you're looking at the historic financials, the market and the margin, all that good stuff as well. So it depends where you are, whether you're sort of very early stage, Series A, or you're acquiring an established company. A lot of businesses that I've been involved in, I've acquired. These are, these are established businesses, well, reasonably established businesses, and I've never sort of been around for a long time. Reasonably established businesses that you are acquiring and doing due diligence on. And what you're really looking at then is, can you take that business and, grow it or improve upon it or make it more efficient? And often cases, the incumbent management team doesn't make it, because you're looking for a different team with a different mindset, with a different outlook to develop that business.
Right. Okay. And I guess what are the common mistakes you see amongst entrepreneurs pitching their idea?
There's a lot of them, but at the end of the day, you're telling a story, aren't you? So one is, you need a beginning, a middle, and an end, essentially, like any story. I think most people, and I've suffered from this myself, actually. I look at some of my presentations, I get feedback myself, and everyone does it. But you get lost in the wilderness. You can't see the wood for the trees. So that you understand the detail and the nuances and the potential. But investors, especially busy ones, they just want to hear the basics. What's your opportunity? How big is it? What's the problem? How are you going to solve it? How are you going to go to market? And can you make money doing that? And do I think you can actually execute? So you need to tick those boxes very, very quickly, capture the imagination, and then, if you need to, then get into the detail. A lot of people sort of jump into the detail very, very quickly. And also the key mistake people make, if you want to answer your question, is know your audience. There's very different pitching to somebody who knows your industry, has been in it for many, many years, and you want them to maybe come on board and become your chairman or someone's going to advise you, to someone who's a cold hard financial investor that doesn't really understand your business really, but they've got a pot of cash. And it's also very different, pitching to a very early stage angel investor, to say, probably not your audience, but a private equity investor. It's quite a different pitch. Or if you're trying to pitch for debt, for example. So the key is to do your research on who you're pitching to, who you're talking to, so that you're saying the right things, you're using the right language, and you understand what the hell you're talking about.
Okay, no, that's great advice. And if you had like three key piece of advice that you'd give to any entrepreneur looking to raise capital for their idea or for their business, what would you say those three pieces of advice would be?
Well, one is don't try and push a square peg through a round hole. I'm going to edit this. I'm going to cough. Can you edit this? So one is one is what I said actually. So is tell a story, beginning, middle, and end. What's the beginning? How are you going to grow the business? What's the middle? How are you going to scale it? What's the end? How are we going to get out of this and get your money back? Essentially, make that very, very clear, very crystal clear. Because a lot of the risk of sometimes of investing in companies is they turn into lifestyle businesses. You're never going to float them on the stock market. You're never going to be able to sell them. So how do you get out? Essentially, you can get locked into these things. VCs often call them the living dead, which is a bit unkind because they can be quite, businesses are doing quite well for themselves. The other one is don't try and push square pegs through round holes. So especially when it comes to fundraising and people, is that if you're fundraising, there's no point in you having an idea in the shower and running out to Andreessen Horowitz on the West Coast, hoping they're going to give you a couple of £1 million. It ain't going to happen. Conversely as well, you need to think about who is the right investor for your business and make sure you expend your energies focusing on those investors, not people that aren't going to do it for reasons such as their mandate doesn't let them to, for whatever reason, the geographic size, scale, stage of your business. Do your homework. Otherwise, you can waste a huge amount of time and it can become absolutely soul destroying trying to raise money. I'm doing it now and it can be really hard work. But for no good reason. You're hitting your head against the wall for no good reason. So they do your homework essentially. And the other one is your team. So you have to be brutal about your team. And that could be you to some extent as well. But just think about when you start a business, and anyone who's starting a business will experience this at some point. You tend to bring people on board who are available. Your friend, your mate, your best mate, your partner, your mum's neighbour's best mate's dog walker because they know something about marketing and they've got a bit of experience because they're available and they want to help. Then you get into conversations about, well, how do you actually compensate them? Because you probably can't pay them. Then you start talking about shares and options. And before you know it, you're giving away 25% of your business to a group of people who I guarantee you will not be around in 3 years' time. And depending how you structure that, you need to be very careful because equity is gold dust. So no matter who's coming into your business, especially the early days, it's like, if you go to university, you spend the first couple of days trying to make friends. You spend the next 3 years trying to avoid them all. So you can end up in that situation. So make sure that, you've got the right people from the outset. I mean, it's not always possible. You've got to hustle, as you say. And your team may change over time. But when they do, and if they do, make sure you get the equity back.
Right. Okay, no, that's great. And I guess outside of your businesses that you're running now, are there any particular sectors that interest you at all?
No, so the sector interests me that's why I started Moblox. So is because I've always, reasonably not always, but my business is quite focused on business services, so mobile, cloud infrastructure, whatever it might be. And the thing that's always frustrated me, and I made a business course, so it's 76 lessons, 10.5 hours.
I've seen that, yeah.
Yeah, it starts up with Piers Linney, although it kind of works for anyone with a new business as well. I don't know why I call it startup. But it's 76 hours, 76 lessons, everything from what legal structure all the way through to understanding a cash flow, marketing and managing people, that kind of thing, and legal structures. And the reason I made that course, it frustrates me because entrepreneurs and founders, they get a lot of information out there, but it's a lot of nonsense. A lot of get rich quick, hustle this, hustle that, which is fine. We want a bit of motivation, a bit of hustle culture. But at the end of the day, it's not going to help you build a proper business and scale it. And so I made the course over there. And at the same time, I realized that a lot of the services that I've been involved in the past, they're aimed at small businesses and startups. They suck. They're not built for that. It's like traditional banks have been disrupted by Starling and Tide and Monzo and Revolut, for example, because they're software driven, customer centric, and they're kind of updated the experience for the customer. And I want to do that in small business services. So I started with mobile. mobile's one of the worst offenders. The telcos are probably worse than the banks. So people are being, ripped off, missold, bundles, out of data. It's just nonsense. So I created Moblox to be a community of small business owners and founders. I call them owner-led businesses. And we offer content and guidance. If you join, you get access to my course for free, actually. I've sold that before between £200 and £500. So that's quite a good deal in itself. And then we built a mobile phone network on the number one network in the UK. Can't tell which one it is, but it's not Vodafone, it's not Three, and it's not O2 or Virgin. So it's built on the number one network in the UK for coverage and speeds. And the idea is to offer, reasonable pricing, competitive pricing, but the content, the guidance, everything else. I'm also going to be adding devices, adding broadband, other telco services. But the idea, though, is that we offer you guidance, content, so you understand technology. Small businesses, they're not using technology in the UK. That's why they're not as productive. Then you understand your options. You can make a better informed purchasing decision about tech, and tech can help you make more money, reduce costs, save you time, so you can go and walk the dog or spend time with your kids or your partner. That's what we're trying to do. And hopefully then when you make that purchasing decision, you make it from Moblox. But there are some services, mostly telco-related services and connectivity and devices that we are going to reimagine and re-engineer ourselves. So if you haven't yet, to Moblox.
Well, it's a key productivity issue, isn't it? With small businesses not adapting new technology.
Yeah, a lot of it's apathy. A lot of it is, when I started out, a small company, a couple of people could make good living out of selling you hardware, software, a rack, an air conditioning unit, building you a server room, which is what everyone used to have, and then supporting it for you. But the cloud and software as a service has killed that. There's no money there anymore. What that means is you've got this explosion of technology for small businesses, but they don't really understand what their options are and what they should be implementing or how to implement it. What Moblox wants to do is change that. And you can't do that one-to-one. So we have to do one-to-many content, which is why I do lots of content. And then hopefully you come to us and you make a better informed purchasing decision. But things like mobile, for example, hasn't changed since the 90s. And it's just apathy. It's like, they're all the same, they're all rubbish. What's the point in changing? And my pet hate is, for example, is it's a con. So they're selling everyone these unlimited plans for 20, 25 quid a month. The average small business user in the UK uses 7 gig. That's it. So you get that for less than a tenner.
Yeah.
So you essentially, if you've got 3 people in your business, right, that you're saving a tenner, 10 to 15 quid a month, times 3, times 12, adds up very quickly.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer, really, isn't it?
That's the idea. But there's a lot of apathy in mobile. So we want people to, just move to mobile. And we've made international calls really cheap as well because, if you're an ethnic minority, you've got family or customers or suppliers abroad, you should be able to sit on the phone to the US, not worry about bundles or being sent some ridiculous bill. You can call that, Europe and America and even India for 2p a minute on Moblox.
Right. No, that's incredible. And what's the current customer base looking like? Is it decent?
So we launched at the end of last year. So we're in the hundreds now. Or we've got thousands members actually. Okay. And we're in hundreds. So a lot of testing because mobile is probably the most complicated thing we'll ever launch. If you think about the billing and the system, they're also integrating into a large carrier is very complicated as well. So we've kind of launched it now, and it's all up and running and working. So now the next job, like anyone else, is to start, get the marketing right and then scale it. And also we're looking at launching other services. So especially things like leasing, so leasing devices, hardware, mobile devices, new refurb to phones, laptops. So you see like that back market, but this is more for small businesses.
And has the feedback been generally positive?
Yeah, it's great because obviously most people on mobile phone networks, they hate them.
Yeah.
So with Moblox, you get a service. Somebody calls you to set you up or to say hello. That freaks most people out. And then with us, you're getting the content, the guidance as well. And the idea, of course, is that we want you to, say you, for example, we want to build a relationship with you. So, your mobile, maybe your call answering is professional call answering, makes your business look better. Maybe your broadband, maybe your devices. And it may end there. You're going to consume our content, hopefully. And the idea is that we do kind of reviews. And when you buy something from us, we get a commission maybe from that person. So it's got to be quite objective, a bit like Which in a way for SMEs. So lots to go at and lots to do over the next 2 years. And no one's if I said to you, what is the UK brand for small businesses and entrepreneurs? There isn't one. That's what I want to create.
Right. Okay. No, that's incredible. And I guess, what's your 5 to 10 year long vision with this? Is it you're going to take it?
I mean, you're never going to get an answer from an entrepreneur asking about 5 years in the future. They don't really know. Entrepreneurs tend to think in weeks. It's quite interesting, actually, that even now I'm dealing with quite large companies.
Yeah.
And they sit in meetings like, well, I had one yesterday, actually, and they're already talking about something next year. When he said it, I thought, sorry, do you mean this year? I thought he got it mixed up, that there's been a new year. He's like, no, 2024. And that does not compute for me. It's all. So often with big companies and entrepreneurs, there's a what's the name? A video on my YouTube channel, Piers Linney TV, where I talk about how small companies who work with big companies. I've had a lot of experience with that. Some painful, some very successful, but quite painful. Even pain to become successful. And you're thinking in days, weeks, and hours, and they're thinking, quarters and years.
Wow.
That can be quite hard to kind of gel together. So the 5-year plan really is to build a business, exit it, and make my invest as much money as possible. Simple as that. And then after that, I think I'll invest and be involved in other companies. I also started Atherton Bikes. If you're into mountain biking, we started Atherton Bikes with the Athertons. It was kind of the raw family of UK mountain biking. Rachel's won the World Cup 6 times. G's won it 2 times, and Dan's won the World Cup races, and also one of the main successful builders of mountain bike tracks in the world. We're building 3D printed titanium and carbon fiber mountain bikes in Wales, and that was literally they're the elite athletes. We had some material scientists, and they wanted someone to help them build a business. And I got a DM from G Atherton, I think on Instagram, and I thought, what the hell? What do you have to DM me for? Do you want to help us build a business? And how many years later we are now? 3 years later, we crowdfunded, raised about £1 million or £1 million crowdfunding.
That's incredible.
And now we've won World Cup races. They're becoming known as probably the most innovative mountain bikes in the world. And we've had several podiums last season. So that was my other. So I'll probably do more things like that where I'm involved, setting up, starting. I'm starting companies from scratch is just like anyone, how old you are, is enjoyable. It's a process, but be prepared for a lot of hard work.
So what keeps you motivated then?
I love the process. I've always, as I said, as we've talked about, I've always been fascinated about business, how they work. I meet anyone. I'm talking to people I was at the business show in the Excel in London recently. Talking to some chap about, he's got a kebab truck and he wants to get another one. Even that conversation. And I actually went to visit him. He's in Spitalfields in London. It fascinates me about why and grow, and it just fascinates me because, especially more small business, because you can't put a piece of paper between the business and the individual. It's the same story in a way. They're sort of very much entangled. A superposition. It's like quantum theory almost. So that's what fascinates me, and what I want to do is help people go into business, be successful, and be in business. Because I think within a generation almost, the idea of employment's going out the window. We're all going to be working for ourselves. Tweeting today about so noticing a self-employment. You're in business, so change the mindset and think about it and approach it that way.
Yeah, no, 100%. What do you think about the new AI revolution? Have you been using that?
You need a whole new podcast for that one. But I mean, I'm a big believer. It's going to change the world, and I don't think we, the simple humans who are used to linear change, whether it's 5%, 10%, 20% in either direction, that's what we're used to. And the world, when you sort of chat GPT, the craze of the moment, which is absolutely nuts if you have used it, especially for copywriting. We don't need a copywriter anymore. But so things like that, it's going to change the world. And when that exponential change kicks in, software's writing software is designing robots and systems and bodies that can move around in ways that we can understand. We're going to be we humans, and also a lot of people are going to be left on the harbour as that boat moves out, and the people with the access to that technology. So things like nuclear fusion and AI, they should be democratized. Otherwise, we're all going to end up working for about 3 people. So you think about AI, think about Chat GPT, think about the ability to create images. Think about what that means when when software can write software, then it improves that, and it can pass a Turing test. You can't tell the difference when you're talking to a person or a machine.
Yeah,
and then the machine can create machines that look like us.
Yeah,
this is. I was actually talking to the deputy leader of the opposition last night, Angela Rayner, about this, and saying that the world is about to change in ways where our education system, our infrastructure, will not be able to catch up. Can't catch up now. Education. And what chance have we got when things are changing exponentially, overnight? Literally, we used to things changing, a year, 5 years, a decade. There's going to be things popping up like every week that we don't understand.
No, 100%. And because obviously with Moblox, you're very small business focused. How do you think that small businesses can adapt and utilize AI to their advantage? Is there ways that they...
Well, I'm a big believer technology generally is an opportunity, isn't it? Because what it means is that the small business can now compete with the big businesses, and it means that you can automate things. I always say automate the mundane, right? The idea of employment, big companies don't want employees, they want contractors, consultants, 0-hour contracts. That's the way the world's going to go. So you're going to end up being the average person now is going to have to retrain 3 times or even more in their life. Average person holds a job for 2 years now. So we're all going to end up in a way working for ourselves in business, maybe alone or in a small group, kind of an organization. And, it's going to be a challenge. Society's going to change. There will be, I was a trustee of Nesta for 6 years, which did a lot of research on us, on the future of work and skills. And by 2030, I think it was, just a couple of years ago now, there are 6 million jobs currently that exist, that will not exist at all. There'll be lots of new jobs that we don't even know what they are yet. So you're trying to educate, my daughters, my stepson, for a world, and to make decisions about their career down the line when they're, in the 14 years old, where teacher has no idea what the world's going to be like. We have no idea what jobs are actually going to exist. So you've got to change people's approach to be trained to have, soft skills, to be enterprising, to be able to evolve, to be able to retrain. They're the skills you need to have, because whatever skills you've got in your lifetime now will at some point become irrelevant, sadly.
Yeah.
In my generation was the last one that could actually just about get by and blag it for 20 years on, with one skill set. That's all going out the window.
100%, yeah. And to tie it back to Moblox, Piers, how much does it cost for a small business to get started with you? Is it expensive?
Well, to join Moblox, become a member and get access to my course and the content currently, we are going to change that. Not so much the course, but the content. It's free. So Moblox.com is free. And then if you want a mobile plan, which I'd love you to come and join us, drop your flipping mobile provider, go and do monthly contracts, join Moblox. And it starts at you can also pay up front as well. So you pay up front for the year, you get a better deal. You pay up front, excluding VAT, let's include that, depending if you're a small company, it's like £4.50. You don't need unlimited data in most cases. You're being ripped off. So check how much data you use. I use 10 gig a month, right? And I quite like YouTube. You spend a lot of time now on Wi-Fi. You didn't even realize it. So check how much data you need. Get a bit more to give you some comfort, and move to Moblox. Join us. Help us beat the big boys.
No, I'll definitely promote it. And I think that's a great place to end the podcast off, Piers. Thank you so much for giving up your time to coming on here. Have you got any last words for the viewers or anything you want to say?
No, not really. It's good. Thank you for having me. And like I say, there's a business in everybody. And at some point, I think every person once in their life should try and start one, even if it is what you want to call it, a side hustle while you're working. And the other bit of advice I will give you, actually, if you are working, is stay in work as long as possible until your business can support you, or you think it will be able to, because it's not something to be taken lightly. But if you're thinking about it, stop thinking about it and do it.